I was born with a case of really bad club feet. They were clubbed and then clubbed again, so that I would never have been able to walk if something hadn't been done. Nothing was done to my feet until I was 1 year old, and by then the cartilage had turned to bone and caused a real problem trying to correct anything. So at 1 year old, I was taken to Shriners Hospital for crippled children, and that became my home away from home for the next 5 years. I had surgery after surgery, just dozens of surgeries during that time, and I don't remember any of it. I shut it out of my mind, but I know that it wasn't a happy time because my picture was on several of the brochures, and I was always the one hugging the teddy bear or the stuffed animal who looked like I was about to cry. Didn't get to see much of my family because I had 3 older brothers, and we were all born within 5 years. My dad worked long hours, and children weren't allowed at the hospital, so it was a lonely time, I'm sure, for me. I went a full year to kindergarten there at Shriners Hospital, and then I was released just before time to start first grade. And I was released with a pair of ugly shoes. They were dark brown shoes that came up to the top of my ankles, and the toes pointed out instead of in. I hated the shoes, and I hated the way I looked in the shoes. I was very self-conscious. I felt like when anybody looked at me, first they noticed that I could hardly walk, and second they noticed the ugly shoes. When I was 13, our pastor, Reverend Proctor, took the teens to hear a speaker at another church, and my brother Joe and I went to hear the speaker. He started out by saying, "God loves you just the way you are." And I thought, there's no way God loves me. I don't love me, and I didn't think anybody else loved me, and I didn't see how God could love me. And then he said, and God created you just the way he wanted you to be. And I knew that couldn't possibly be right. I thought, why would God create somebody that looked like me? But he got my attention, and I listened to everything he had to say. At some point in that message, I began to believe what he was saying. He said God loved us so much that he was willing to let his son die a horrible death on the cross for us. And I began to realize that what I had been through was nothing compared to what Christ went through. At the end of that message, I went forward and knelt at the altar, and Christ became a part of my life. At that point, all the self-pity and self-hatred just melted away. My life was changed. A year later, I was back at Shriners Hospital for crippled children, this time for a real intricate bone surgery. They took 3 bones in each foot and switched them around to try to make the feet straighter. And it was a very painful surgery with a long recovery, a lot of rehab. But my parents were contacted to come and bring me home, and we met with a group of doctors there at Shriners. It was always that way. It was always a large group that I met with. And one of the doctors said to my parents, you can take her to the nearest shoe store and buy her any pair of shoes she wants. Well, I had always thought and had been told that I would have to wear my ugly shoes for the rest of my life. These dark brown shoes with the toes pointing out. And it was a shock to me and to my parents. We had no idea that this surgery could do that for me. We went to a shoe store there in Chicago, and I looked around and I found a pair of bright red shoes. And I said, those are the shoes I want. Well, they let me get them, and I went home in those bright red shoes. I'm sure people thought I was really goofy, but it was nice to not have to wear brown shoes. We went home, and the first thing I did was walk across the street to this field where my brothers played ball. And I sat down in the grass and I took off my red shoes and my socks, and I walked across the field for the first time with straight feet. And at the end of the field, I kneeled down and I thanked God for the miracle that He had done through the doctors at Shriners. A generation later, our daughter, Christy, was born with the same feet. We had been told that couldn't happen, that wasn't going to happen, and so we didn't worry about it. We knew that the treatments needed to start immediately, so she was 11 days old and she had her first surgery. And every 2 weeks after that, she had surgery on her feet. She had braces and casts and all that, but not to the degree that I did. She was very young, and we began to realize that she was really good at tennis, even with those tiny little crippled feet. She was good at it, and she started winning trophies. She was 13, and she was practicing down at Allen Park with her coach, Mr. Gunther. And I began to realize that there was a lady who was watching her, just coming every day and watching Christy. And I'd see her when I'd come to pick Christy up. And I finally got the nerve to go over by her and I said, "Do you know my daughter?" And she said, "I know what you went through with your feet. And I know what Christy went through with her feet." She said, "My husband and I had a baby girl with feet just like that. And the doctors told us to let the baby die." She said, "We were told she would always be institutionalized, she would never be able to walk, she would ruin our marriage and our home, and we should just let her die there at the hospital." And she said, "We did that. We let our baby die." And she said, "I come and I watch Christy play tennis, and I pretend that she's my daughter." Christy went on to win the regional, sectional, singles tennis title when she was a senior. Went on to IVCC and played in the nationals for 2 years. And Christy loves the Lord, as do I. And we don't take our lives for granted. And we don't take the ability to walk for granted. But we know this. I know that not everybody has a miracle like that performed in their life. That isn't something we can expect. But there's a much greater miracle. And that is the miracle of God allowing His Son to die on the cross. What I have spent my life realizing that is that it doesn't really matter what I look like. And it really doesn't matter what I've been through with my life, or what I did with my life, how talented or smart. Those aren't really the things that matter. What matters is what God did for me by sending His Son to die on the cross. Because through that I can have a relationship day by day with Him. And I can know that when I die, I'll spend eternity with Him. And that really is a miracle.